Do you know what people love more than reality TV? Medical dramas. And in the beginning of 2025, HBO Max would premiere the first season of what would now be a critically acclaimed TV show. The Pitt would go on to redefine medical dramas, as it doesn't want to be a copy of Chicago Med, Private Practice, or even the notorious Grey's Anatomy. The Pitt is an interesting but fresh take on the lives of emergency room doctors. It isn't your average Grey's Anatomy season. We don't have doctors dwelling on their love life or sneaking into a private sector of the hospital to have a romantic relations with people they shouldn't be having romantic relations with. The Pitt is supposed to be a realistic depiction of what emergency room doctors go through in one shift. The important thing to remember is that each season represents one shift in the ER, which follows a 15-hour shift. A season that is supposed to balance the storylines between the doctors and patients. And now, introducing our day shift. The biggest complaint we've seen is that the Pitt isn't following proper story structure, and it's leaving stories unresolved by the end of the season. First, we have to understand what story structure is and what people think story structure is. For television, there are two ways to structure your story, and it's based on the length of your episode. Usually, the theme of your show dictates the length. Comedies are a half hour, and dramas are usually an hour. Naturally, you would think that if you have 1 hour to write out a story in an episode, you would have more time to flush things out. Half-hour episodes don't give you much room, so you have to quickly get to your point, whatever that point is. So imagine you're a writer, and you have an hour which is approximately 45 to 65 pages long. You have to fit actions and dialogue into these pages. So why am I talking about length, and why does it matter so much? If the Pitt has an hour to write all of these storylines, shouldn't they be able to find resolutions by the end of the hour? They have, and for some characters, they haven't. The point is, when you have more room, you have more time to explore different characters, and the Pitt's main disadvantage is that it's telling you a story that's only taking place in one day. The characters can only change so much in a single day, and that is the point people are missing. So, it resorts to people saying it's bad writing and the Pitt isn't following a narrative story structure because over the 15 weeks we've watched the show, they believed nothing has changed or have been resolved. So that brings me to plot versus story. And as you know, people love talking about plot. A story focuses on the big picture, the overall theme of the film, show, or book. This focuses on the characters and their arcs, why they behave and feel the way that they do. Most importantly, how the character changes throughout the story, whether it's a good or a bad outcome. Now, the plot is what drives the story. Basically, the order of when things are happening. An easy example is John Wick. The plot being he lost his wife to cancer, he has a dog that means a lot to him, his home is invaded, and the dog is killed. So, it sends John into this journey of avenging his dog. The story is about his character and why he is doing these things. Why he is so attached to the dog. How does he react when he sees his dead dog when he wakes up? John losing his wife is essential to his story. His journey of him becoming who he is by the end of the movie. Another example is Grey's Anatomy.
Man, boo. Tomato, tomato, tomato. I'm throwing tomatoes.
Now, before you say anything, Grey's Anatomy is being compared simply because it is another medical drama, a very popular medical drama. And almost everyone has seen at least something revolving the show. It doesn't have to be a full episode. And not to mention, it is the longest running medical drama of all time. So yes, we're going to bring up Grey's Anatomy. Early on in the show, we're introduced to Jackson Avery and April Kepner, and they eventually become a couple. April is a god worshipper and Jackson isn't. Their stories intertwine with their fates. Like in real life, what you've been through usually dictates how you view religion. They lose their child during childbirth, and April is naturally devastated, and so is Jackson. But he tells her they could just have another baby.
Man, boo. Tomato, tomato, tomato. I'm throwing tomatoes.
This reaction makes April see him differently, ultimately ruining the relationship. The chain reaction of Jackson behaving this way is a plotline. It changed the direction of their story, their love story. Had Jackson never said that, April wouldn't have felt her only support system was demeaning how she was feeling. Had April not lost her child, Jackson wouldn't have had that reaction, and they would be a happy family of 3. Jackson not being a God believer isn't a plot. That's a storyline, and it's easy to get the two things confused, which is why it's important to understand these two things, especially as a writer. But if you're a viewer, and you find yourself criticizing the writing, you have to do this with an understanding the differences between plot and story. All of this to say, plot and stories go hand in hand. If you feel that something is a plot hole because it goes unexplained, that isn't a plot hole. That's just something that wasn't explained to you. An actual plot hole is when things aren't aligning with the storyline and it leaves actual gaps or contradicts the character's actions. This doesn't mean that if a character acts slightly different than they usually do, there is a plot hole present. Now let's use the Pitt for this example. Using a random theory that wouldn't make sense in this show. Dr. Santos stealing a scalpel to stab Dr. Langdon has been a theory since we saw Dr. Santos take the scalpel. Up until this point, Dr. Santos' behavior towards Langdon has been regarding his lack of consequence. Their relationship hasn't been good. He is supposed to be in the position of teaching her. Instead, he has spent his time berating her and actually make it seem like she's incapable of doing her job. Ironically, the things you guys accused Dr. Robby of doing, Dr. Langdon actually has done.
Your job is to shut up, listen, and learn, because so far today, the only thing you have been successful at is proving repeatedly that you know nothing.
Dr. Langdon?
This doesn't allow you to attack either of the actors, by the way. That shit is weird. This is also behavior Dr. Robby called him out on, which yes, makes Dr. Robby a hypocrite, which is a common thing among people. It's also really obvious that people have an issue with morally gray characters. It seems that either you're a good character or you're a bad character, and it's never in between. If you've seen how people respond to Dr. Santos in the show, a lot of people really hate her because on a surface level, she's kind of a dickhead, right? But the show has also given you clues that Dr. Santos has a troubled past, and she's actually a really complex character. Everyone is just talking about these things on a very surface level, and it's kind of annoying. It's the same with Dr. Robby. He's not supposed to be a perfect character or a saint, and he's also not supposed to be the worst character in the world. He's a flawed human being, which is supposed to be relatable to a lot of people. And yet, we're all sitting here vilifying him as if the trauma he's going through isn't validated, especially when you're working in an environment as hectic and crazy as the emergency department. The amount of people I see online say they don't care about Dr. Robby's story and how it's just not entertaining or interesting enough for them to care about is baffling to me. It is especially confusing when we're all acting like we care about mental health. Then, when creators are finally highlighting mental health in a way that we've never seen on TV before, to the lengths that we've never seen on TV before, and we're having these very difficult conversations, you're all tuning out and saying you don't care. What's up with that? You all claim that watching Dr. Robby have these difficult conversations with his colleagues is repetitive and we've seen it before. Why do we have to watch it again? So let me get this straight. You mean to tell me that if someone you knew was going through a really tough time and they were thinking about ending it all for good, you would have one conversation with them, and if they weren't convinced, you would just say, "Fuck it, I tried"? You do not care as much as you lead on. I wish all of you would just stop being so performative. So regarding the theory that she was going to stab Dr. Langdon wouldn't have made sense because nothing happened in the plot that would warrant that. Not even in her story would this make sense. Her character doesn't behave in this way. Another example of plot holes are inconsistencies in the story. Characters saying things that didn't happen, like if one scene Dr. Santos is doing CPR on a patient, and then the next scene where she's supposed to be performing CPR, the patient is actually awake and alert, and is telling her that their chest hurts. In a cohesive plot, this would be the opposite. The patient is awake and complaining about chest pain, and suddenly codes for whatever reason. Then you would proceed to see Dr. Santos performing chest compressions, and so on, to try to revive the patient. So that brings me to unresolved plot threads, which are plots that are parts in the story that are purposely left unresolved. This is usually done to create suspense, to warrant the audience to come back for more. This is probably done more in films where they're planning on writing a sequel and they want the audience to leave with questions and hopefully find the answers they're looking for in the next film. A big recent example was Marvel's Infinity War, ending with Thanos wiping half of the population and disappearing to a new planet. This leaves the viewers wondering what will happen next, and for those of us who saw it in real time, we had to wait an entire year to find out what happened next. Another popular film that has left the audience with an unresolved plot is Inception, a movie so many people talk about. Christopher Nolan, who was deemed to be one of the best directors and writers in the industry, has left the plot unresolved. So why is it a problem when a show that is supposed to be ongoing, meaning there will be a time for some of these stories to be resolved? Why call it bad writing when you don't get why a character is written off, or maybe not having too much screen time in the finale? Is it only bad writing when a character you like gets written off, and it's only good when a character you don't like gets written off? Now this is probably the most popular topic of the show, Dr. Mohan and her departure. What is wild to me is that for 2 seasons we have watched her story play out, and if I'm being honest, Dr. Mohan probably has the most cohesive story out of all the characters. In season 1, we see her story play out for the entirety of the season, where we learn as an audience that Dr. Mohan puts a lot of time and care into every patient she sees. The downside is that the type of care and time she puts in does not work in this specific environment. We see Dr. Robby in the first season pushing her to work faster and not take as much time on each patient so that more patients can be seen. All of it makes sense to me. And in season 2, we see the continuation of that story. We learn that Dr. Mohan is looking at new fellowships and trying to get a feel for where she belongs. There is something different about her this season. She feels distracted and distant, which causes her to make a mistake on one of her patients. To show you how much she cares, let's highlight one of the more prominent patient storylines this season. Orlando is a man who was suffering from not receiving medication for his uncontrolled diabetes. He works as a construction worker and doesn't have insurance. He could not afford the medications and treatments they were providing during his visit, so he went against medical advice and left. He tried to commit suicide, but it failed, and he ended up dying. We saw how that affected Dr. Mohan, and I think that cemented in her mind that she did not belong in the emergency department anymore. She ultimately took the advice Dr. Robby gave her earlier in the season, that maybe she would be better suited for the geriatrics department. What I will say is that maybe, and I don't know if this information got leaked or if the showrunners purposely let it get out, it was revealed before the season was even over that the actress who plays Dr. Mohan would not be returning for season 3. This opened a can of worms that quite frankly didn't need to be opened. Some people will say that the natural course of direction for Dr. Mohan's story was for her to realize that she belonged in the emergency department all along, and all she needed to do was believe in herself. But if you ask me, I think that is too much of a fairy tale ending. It's not real, and it's not the story they've been telling us. There is nothing wrong with finding out that you don't belong in a place where you once had hoped you would fit in. So when the audience finds out that Supriya would not be rejoining the cast in season 3, the fandom does what all fandoms normally do. They overreact. Another issue is regarding Dr. Al-Hashimi's story and how the audience has reacted to it. She is shadowing Dr. Robby for the shift so she can take over when he leaves on sabbatical. Throughout her time there, Dr. Robby and other doctors begin to notice that she will start to blankly stare and not really react to the things around her. Despite people talking to her directly and emergencies occurring in front of her, she is just still and unresponsive. The audience doesn't really know why this is happening, and we don't know until the last 2 episodes, where it's been revealed that she has a seizure disorder. An important fact is that she has been seizure-free for 10 years up until this point. Her medication has helped her, but for some reason it doesn't seem like it's working now, so her seizures are back. She is obviously conflicted because she knows this isn't a good thing. It's not good for her or anyone around her. Now these seizures go unnoticed because she doesn't convulse. She just looks like she's lost in thought, and for those who don't know what an absent seizure looks like, they will have no clue what's happening. So she admits this to Dr. Robby, and it turns into an argument because she doesn't want to report it, and if she doesn't report it, he would have to. This is solely because having a seizure during an emergency is not safe for her or the patients. If someone begins to code in front of her and she's alone in the room with that patient and a seizure begins, she won't be able to notify anyone or do anything to help the patient. You can argue that everyone else will begin to hear the alarms, but her being there at that moment could help because with emergency situations, a lot of the time, when you intervene early, the prognosis will be good. It can also put her in danger because as we saw in previous episodes, some patients can be dangerous. There are many ways that this could be dangerous for her and the patients. Dr. Robby pointing this out and telling her that she can only be in charge of the ED when she gets her seizures back under control is not ableist. She is going to be in charge of the whole emergency department and all the staff will be looking to her for help, and if she can't help, that is another issue. It is not that Dr. Al-Hashimi is not capable. She is very capable and has proven that. Again, Dr. Robby tells her when she gets her seizures under control again, meaning she is seizure-free, she will be able to work there. Dr. Al-Hashimi's reaction is literally out of frustration and fear that if she can't find something that will help her, she can't continue to be a doctor in the emergency department. This isn't an ending to her story, but understanding what ableism is and what it isn't is important. Fighting this hard for a character who you're saying is experiencing ableism feels like that is something you probably aren't doing in your real life, or you think you are, and instead you're just not helping in the way that you think you are. Throughout the first season, we see that the hospital is having issues with money. They can't afford to pay their doctors and nurses well, and they also can't afford the extra security that is supposed to protect the workers. The show has been explaining in different ways that they can't afford to do anything extra. So the argument of having 2 attendings together isn't realistic for this hospital. Although Dr. Al-Hashimi is trying to advocate for this, they won't give in because she wants it. Regardless, if they somehow make it work and have 2 attendings, it is still dangerous for her to have seizures. Let's entertain the plot hole crowd for a minute. If Dr. Al-Hashimi returns next season as a second attending and they don't explain why or how they're doing this, then yes, That would be a plot hole because the show has spent so much time telling you they do not have the money to provide more beds or security for the nurses. How would they all of a sudden have the financial means to support 2 attendings at the same time? One thing I've noticed is that when people decide they don't like certain aspects of something, they pretty much deem the entire show or movie as trash. They regard it that way for years to come, similar to how some of the Stranger Things fan base were screaming about plot holes for no reason. I know we spent most of the video discussing criticisms about the show and trying to answer as many of them as we could, but I wanted to take the rest of our time to highlight the positives I think the show does well. One of my favorite aspects of The Pitt is how real the show feels. I don't have a medical degree, so I don't know if the procedures are accurate when a patient comes in, but I mean it in the sense of how they treat patients and address misconceptions we might have about certain demographics or situations. The show highlights how unfair the healthcare department really is. They don't have great pay, yet they're expected to work constant overtime. This causes significant burnout amongst doctors and nurses. This was a major theme this season, with Dr. Santos being unable to finish her charting and everyone falling behind because the computer systems got hacked. Throughout the 15 weeks the show is on, we see how much burnout they're feeling. Some handle it well and others don't, like Dr. Robby and Dr. Santos. Another aspect I liked from the show is when they highlighted the struggles victims of sexual assault go through due to systemic failures. It's not a process I knew much about. My only prior experience was on Law & Order SVU. I found it incredibly insightful, but also devastating to hear the facts involved. For example, when Dana finished with the kit and went to place it with the others, she was upset because the kits already there were supposed to have been picked up by the detectives. If I remember correctly, they were supposed to be collected within 78 hours, and they just weren't. It highlights how many people don't take things like this seriously. I even liked how later in the season, when 2 detectives were there for a completely different reason, Dana made them take the kits. That was a very valid crash out. Because what do you mean it's not your job to take care of that when your whole purpose is to serve and protect? I also really enjoyed watching how the show handled mental health this season and last season. I know a lot of people don't like this aspect of the show this season, but when you hate yourself as much as Dr. Robby hates himself, he's just not going to treat people with the kindness and empathy that we're expecting him to do. It's just not realistic. If you've ever been depressed on any level, you know that's the case. It doesn't excuse this kind of behavior, but that's kind of the point. I just appreciate the writers incorporating this kind of attention to men's mental health, because at least to me, I don't think men's mental health is highlighted enough in the world of entertainment. I think the way that the Pitt handles autism with Dr. King and her sister is really cool, because I think it erases a lot of the misconceptions people have about autism and how people with autism act and behave. There are a lot of spectrums and not everyone behaves or acts the same way. It was really cool to see autism be represented in this way. I do appreciate that being autistic is not treated like some personality trait. The show highlights how it affects 2 individuals differently, but how they're still able to deal with things like everyone else. It doesn't define Dr. King or Becca, but it does show how it impacts them daily. Dr. King is able to work and have friendships, and her sister is moving on to building a romantic relationship. Whereas I've noticed that people view autism a lot of the time as someone who is nonverbal. Because it's such a broad spectrum, it's important to try to highlight everyone within it. I also like the way that the show handles addiction and recovery, with Dr. McKay being sober and Dr. Langdon on his quest for forgiveness, not only from his peers but for himself. This is a very hard thing to do. As we've seen in the show, not everyone is going to welcome them with open arms, especially given the dynamic that Dr. Langdon and Dr. Santos has with each other. Watching Dr. Langdon's relationship with Dr. Robby, it was clear he spent the majority of this season kind of afraid and not really believing in himself until he did that one procedure later on in the season. I thought it was really cool watching him on his redemption arc, so to speak. The title of the video poses the question, what went wrong with the Pitt, specifically season 2? Unfortunately, the answer that I've come to,
it's you.
You're the problem. To the ones who have turned their back on the show, you spent the better part of the season poking holes where holes don't exist because you want to find something to criticize. Do not get me wrong, criticism is always good, but only when there's criticism to be had. The show isn't perfect by any means, but a lot of the talking points that I've highlighted from the fandom isn't actual criticism of the show. It's just illogical. A lot of you pretend like you know what story structure, plot points, and plot holes are, but it's so clear that you don't know what any of these things are. A lot of the things you guys are complaining about can be solved with a simple Google search. No matter how much you guys say the show taking place in one shift shouldn't matter because it's a TV show, makes no sense. These character arcs are happening in small increments. It is impossible for there to be resolutions for a lot of these characters because once again, it is taking place in a single shift. What happened? The shift that happened from season 1 to season 2 isn't a quality dip from the creators and writers of the Pitt. It's actually more simple than that. You're watching the Pitt, but you have a completely different version of it in your head, and that's not the show the creators are making. If you enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot if you like this video and comment your favorite moments of season 2 down below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like this. We have a lot more interesting videos coming up. We're doing a deep dive on Ryan Coogler's Sinners as well as The Whale, with even more to come in the future. Remember to be kind to yourself and check in on those who matter the most to you. Thank you.